Derrida's work, The Ear of the Other, discusses themes of deconstruction, ethics, and the nature of language. Originating as a lecture series, this work provides profound insights into how meaning is constructed and communicated, emphasizing the role of interpretation and the ethical responsibilities involved in listening and responding to the other. As Derrida navigates these ideas, he challenges traditional conceptions of authorship, voice, and textuality, presenting a complex and layered approach to understanding the act of communication. The metaphor, the ear of the other, captures the dual nature of listening, both as physical act and as a process imbued with ethical and philosophical dimensions. Listening is not passive. It requires an openness to alterity, the acknowledgement of the other's distinctiveness, and the commitment to engage with their voice without subsuming it under pre-existing frameworks of understanding. In this context, the ear becomes a symbol of receptivity and vulnerability, highlighting the ways in which we are shaped by the voices we hear and the texts we read. Derrida interrogates the concept of authorship, deconstructing the notion of a unified sovereign authorial voice. He posits that author's intent cannot fully determine the meaning of a text because language itself is inherently unstable and open to multiple interpretations. This instability arises from what Derrida terms difference, the perpetual deferral of meaning within language. Words gain significance not through inherent essence but through their relations to other words, creating a dynamic interplay that resists closure. In this way, the text becomes a site of infinite possibilities where meaning emerges through the interaction between the text and its readers. Derrida's deconstruction of authorship also implicates the reader, positioning them as an active participant in the creation. The reader's interpretive act is not neutral but informed by their unique context, history, and subjectivity. This relationship underscores the ethical dimension of reading. To read responsibly is to engage with the text and its otherness without imposing a singular authoritative interpretation. Derrida's insistence on this ethical engagement challenges readers to confront their assumptions and remain attuned to the plurality of voices within a text. Language is both a bridge and a barrier to understanding. While it enables communication, it uses the possibility of miscommunication and misunderstanding. The act of writing, in particular, embodies this duality. Writing transcends the immediate presence of the author, allowing the text to reach an audience beyond its original context. This detachment also renders the text susceptible to interpretations that diverge from the author's intentions. Derrida views this openness not as a flaw but as an inherent characteristic of language, one that reflects its richness and complexity. Derrida emphasizes the importance of context in shaping interpretation. Text exists in isolation. It is always embedded within a network of cultural, historical, and linguistic references. Understanding a text requires an attentiveness to these contexts as well as an acknowledgement of their fluidity. Contexts are not fixed but constantly shifting, influenced by the interplay of past and present, the familiar and the foreign. This fluidity complicates the act of interpretation, demanding a continual renegotiation of meaning. Derrida's reflections extend beyond the rhetorical to address practical and ethical concerns. He questions the responsibilities of listener, the reader, and the interpreter, highlighting the stakes involved in the act of understanding. To listen to the other is to recognize their singularity, to hear their voice without reducing it to a mere echo of one's own assumptions. This ethical imperative requires a suspension, a willingness to dwell in ambiguity and uncertainty. It is an invitation to encounter the other on their terms rather than imposing one's own framework of meaning. The idea of hospitality is central to Derrida's ethical vision. Hospitality in this context refers to the openness and receptivity required to welcome the other. It involves a readiness to be transformed by the encounter, to allow the other's voice to challenge and reshape one's own understanding. This concept of hospitality is inherently paradoxical because it involves both an invitation and a risk. The invitation to engage with the other and the risk of being unsettled by their alterity. This tension underscores the ethical complexity of communication, reminding us that listening and understanding are never straightforward or unproblematic. Derrida's engagement with the philosophical tradition is evident throughout the work. He draws on the works of thinkers like Levinas, Nietzsche, Martin Heidegger, weaving their insights into his own reflections. Levinas's emphasis on the ethical primacy of the other resonates deeply with Derrida's concerns, particularly in relation to the responsibilities of listening and responding. Nietzsche's critique of metaphysical certainties informs Derrida's deconstruction of stable meanings, while Heidegger's exploration of language and being provides a backdrop for Derrida's inquiries into textuality and interpretation. Through these engagements, Derrida situates his thought within a broader intellectual tradition while also pushing its boundaries. One of the most striking aspects of Derrida's approach is his attentiveness to the performative dimension of language. He highlights how language not only describes but also enacts shaping realities and relationships. This performative aspect is particularly evident in the act of naming, which Derrida examines with great care. Naming is both an assertion of power and a gesture of vulnerability. It seeks to fix also exposing the fragility of such attempts, as names are always subject to reinterpretation and renegotiation. This duality reflects the broader dynamics of language, where stability and instability coexist in a productive tension. Derrida's reflections on the performative nature of language extend to the act of listening itself. To listen is to merely to receive, but to respond, to participate in an ongoing dialogue. This dialogical nature of listening highlights its ethical stakes because it involves a commitment to remain engaged with the other's voice. Derrida's emphasis on dialogue challenges the notion of communication as a one-way transmission of meaning, instead highlighting its reciprocal and dynamic character. Derrida resists the privileging of voice as the direct and authentic expression of meaning, arguing that writing has its own richness and complexity. Both voice and writing are mediated by language, subject to the dynamics of difference and the possibilities of misinterpretation. By deconstructing the binary opposition between voice and writing, Derrida reveals the interconnectedness of these modes of communication, emphasizing their shared reliance on the play of language. Derrida here challenges readers to rethink their assumptions about meaning, communication, and ethics. His deconstructive approach does not seek to dismantle or destroy, but to uncover the complexities and contradictions that underlie our process of interpretation. In doing so, Derrida opens up new possibilities for understanding, inviting readers to engage with texts and voices in ways that are both critical and compassionate.